Welcome back to Tied Down TV, the punk rock opinion show with me, Geoff.
I'm Danny.
And we're back after a week off because Danny went to New York. How was New York, Dan?
New York was the first time I've ever been to New York, and it was probably I've been to a lot of places. It's probably the first place I've ever been where it was absolutely everything I was expecting it to be.
Yeah.
The good and the bad.
Yeah.
You know, it was brilliant, impressive, dangerous at times, urban, everything I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
Dirty even at times.
Yeah. Honestly,
Yeah.
I went about nearly 10 years ago and felt exactly the same about it.
Yeah.
Weird, like it's got a different vibe than a lot of other cities, hasn't it?
Yeah, and it's, you know, and everyone who knows me know I've always had a fascination with New York. It was somewhere I always wanted to go. Mm-hmm. I went to a lot of places of interest. I went to A7, CB's. Mm-hmm. And as we know, New York, one of the great places in the world for music. You know, not just for punk, for hip-hop and lots of other stuff as well. So, today's video, going from one musical city to another, one of the best musical cities in the world.
Very iconic city for music as well.
And today we're talking about bands from Manchester. So, what makes Manchester great? What makes any city, what makes its music synonymous with that city? What makes a city great when it comes to music?
Well, I think when you think about the iconic cities, so you've mentioned New York. I mean, you could spend half an hour listing iconic bands who have come out of New York out of all genres, couldn't you? Like I say, you know, even off the top of your head, you know, Sonic Youth and all that stuff, all the art movements, Velvet Underground, blah, 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 hip-hop, all that. You're talking about Manchester now, or you could maybe say the same about, like, Liverpool a little bit. I don't know, what makes them great for...
Cities that have gone through a lot of struggle.
I think a lot of the northern ones produced a lot of good music during the 80s, for obvious reasons, if you know UK politics and things, but also like maybe that because that working class, that little graft and grind, coming from council estates, coming from underprivileged,
hard times,
exactly, of course, through chaos, trauma, you know, great art can be made, can't it? And I think that's pretty evident.
I think that's what New York and Manchester especially have massively in common.
Yeah, I would agree.
You know what I mean? Like,
spend large portions of 70s, 80s being pretty. You know, low derelict in places, a lot of crime, a lot of unemployment, those kinds of things.
But just back to Manchester now, just for a second. I mean, we can trace its music, it's really good music back a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
You know, even like before, you know, you go and stuff like the Hollies.
Amazing. Yeah.
The Bee Gees, stuff like that, going back, 60s now.
Herman's Hermits as well.
Yeah, going way back, you know, and I spoke, I don't know if it's been a couple of weeks, but I can't remember, I mentioned Burt Bacharach on one of our videos about him being one of the greatest songwriters for other people. Well, the Gibb brothers from the Bee Gees have wrote handfuls of hits for other people that people don't even realise. Yeah. So Manchester, you know, going back even before we reach maybe its peak years of like the late 70s, 80s, you know, and then it was important in the development of the rave culture.
I think it's had a couple of peak
periods,
hasn't it?
Do you know what I mean? And then obviously in the Britpop era, had a lot to say as well.
Yeah, and I think that's touched on there, rave, Britpop, indie, all that kind of like underground alternative. I don't think you can discount, regardless of what you think of a lot of the artists, how much chart success has come out of Manchester. Yeah. Take that, M People, 10cc, 1975, Hertz, tons of pop bands. You know, it seems they have influence on both.
They've also created, I consider, probably the shittest band.
Oh yeah,
fucking Elbow. I fucking hate that band so much.
Fair enough.
I remember watching them on fucking on one of the
Jules Holland.
On one of the Glastonbury's once, and I was fucking. I was trying to see what the fuss was about, and I just thought this band is fucking unbelievably boring. So yeah, as good as Manchester is, they did create Elbow. So,
okay. Yeah. and I suppose we've got to touch on one iconic band, because we both picked 5 bands, but neither of us have actually picked Oasis, have we?
No, and I do think Oasis are a band who, you know, especially them first couple of albums, they
kick-started guitar music again in this country, didn't they?
Pretty much. And you know, I think sometimes as well, like Oasis sometimes can be a little bit misunderstood. Mm-hmm. Like I remember speaking to my dad, especially my dad hates Oasis, like he really hates Oasis, he hates the Gallagher brothers, and he said arrogant bastards and arrogant. But it is. But one of the things that I remember hearing Noel Gallagher saying once was Oasis in a way was a little bit of a reaction to Nirvana, and he heard Nirvana had come over and they created a song called I Hate Myself and I Want to Die.
Yeah.
And they played it to the kids. And he thought to himself, I'm not fucking having that. We've got fuck all in this town. It's fucking, and and then he said no. And he started writing songs like Live Forever and stuff like that. And he's going to say, waking up in the fucking morning is the best thing in the world. Kids don't need to hear that shit kind of thing. And their attitude was, let's fucking get out there and let's fucking have it. Do you know what I mean? Let's get out to the world. Let's fucking have life.
Themselves the greatest band in the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extremely positive attitude, really. Do you know what I mean?
It's
when
almost
you think
like
about
that self-manifestation thing. You just believe it, say it enough.
Yeah, yeah.
It'll almost become true. They were at one point one of the biggest bands in the world. Definitely the biggest in the UK by a fucking mile.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a great band, early doors especially, they were a great band, let's be fair.
Yeah. I think everyone, if they were going to admit it to themselves, everyone likes at least one Oasis song.
They've got some absolute tunes, But neither of us picked them, but do you want to...
Yeah. So the first pick I've gone for who am I going to pick first out of? I'm going to go for the Stone Roses first. The reason I'm going to go for the Stone Roses is I don't think Manchester has a specific sound.
No.
It has a specific, it can have when you think of like the cliche of the baggy pants of that time and dancing and stuff like that. Yeah, I think if there was going to be a specific Manchester sound, Stone Roses would surely be the band who would be the closest to what you'd say.
I think what people think of Manchester as a sound,
do you know what I mean? And they started off as a pretty much a straight up punk band, and they were despised in Manchester. Really, no one had put them on. And I think it wasn't until they recorded Sally Cinnamon and again, I remember seeing an interview with Noel Gallagher where he said Manchester was a very great place until Sally Cinnamon come along, and it was like someone just switched the light on and everything turned to colour.
Yeah.
And a lot of bands around Manchester were like, I can do that. A lot of working class lads, I can do that as well.
Yeah, that punk thing.
Yeah, so the influence was there, and that first album, the self-titled, is brilliant.
Undeniable.
It's absolutely brilliant. There's a really good documentary on YouTube. I think it's called Blood on the Turntable.
Yeah.
And it's an absolutely fascinating documentary about the rise and fall of the Stone Roses, and particularly their fucking manager who really screwed them over big time. And he's literally like an evil cartoon character. And the fact that he even had some brass neck to do interviews for this for this documentary is hilarious. And when you watch it, I definitely recommend anyone who's interested in Manchester music to watch. I'm sure it was called Blood on the Turntable. Right. It's a really fascinating documentary on YouTube. But yeah, Stone Roses is my first pick.
That's a great pick. I know what we were saying about Oasis. Stone Roses, Ian Brown had a lot of that same swagger and confidence in that best band in the world kind of thing. Like, and it got them, quite far.
Well, I think as well they had a lot to do with like. They also had a lot to do with the rise and like the rave thing as well. You look at the second album; they had songs like "Begging You" and stuff like that. Really good, like fucking, and that whole hacienda thing.
Until the 90s, though, the second album.
Yeah, well, 1990 wasn't it?
No,
was it later?
Like 95, I think, 94.
Was it?
Yeah, because there was a big gap, wasn't there? The first album was like 89, something like that.
Oh, okay.
I think I might be slightly wrong, but I think there's about 4 years between the two albums. Yeah. But anyway, pick number one for me. I've gone for Buzzcocks. Now, slightly maybe cheating a little bit because technically they were formed in Bolton, but I know a couple of members are from Manchester, and they are iconic and synonymous with Manchester. Now, when they originally formed, obviously Pete Shelley, Howard Devoto was on vocals, and they did the Spiral Scratch 7-inch, which is fantastic, and then he left to form Magazine. Well, not straight away, but I think about a year later. But anyway, one of the reasons that I think the Buzzcocks, aside from how fucking great they are as a band, iconic, when we're talking about Manchester, so they put on the Leicester Free Trade Hall show, very famous Sex Pistols show, that about 30 people were at, but about 500 claim to have been at. I know certain ones, like I think Joy Division were all there, I think Morrissey was there, Tony Wilson claims to be there, but a few of like Joy Division claim that he wasn't there. I think Mick Hucknall from Simply Red was there. Anyway, you'd all know that gig, and it inspired almost everyone there to go off and form their own bands if they hadn't already. And the Buzzcocks then supported the Pistols, I think, in July '76 in Manchester, the second time they played. Again, they're kind of synonymous, Buzzcocks, for being very melodic, almost like pop punk.
Definitely.
Like early pop punk.
Yeah.
But let's not forget their contribution to D-Beat, You Tear Me Up, Another Music for a Different Kitchen album. It's a straightly intro to that, straight up like a D-Beat track. But yeah, they're just a fucking amazing... I've talked about it before, I think we both have, how great they are, especially the Going Steady singles collection. Iconic band, iconic 70s and 80s UK punk band, and yeah, That's it, the Buzzcocks.
Brilliant pick, brilliant band, excellent band. Seems we're talking about more a straight up thing. My next pick is going to be Slaughter and the Dogs. Now, not necessarily the best band for 70s punk at all. In fact, a lot of bands that were around in this era of punk were, I'd consider, a lot better than Slaughter and the Dogs. However, Slaughter and the Dogs is still a very good band, especially the Do It Doggy Style album. It opens up with Where Have All the Boot Boys Gone, which is a brilliant song. Yeah. And obviously, I just think they were one of those bands as well that influenced. I've heard everyone from the bigger 80s Manchester bands cite Slaughter and the Dogs as an influence. Yeah. So for that reason, I picked them. Really, mainly their influence. Like I say, in the 70s, there was certainly better punk bands around, better straight up punk bands.
They were around pretty early though, weren't they? I feel like they would be pre-76.
Well, that album's 78, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no, but I mean as a band, because I'm sure they came up in like the you know, what people call like now the pub rock.
Well, you've got that sound, that's for sure.
Yeah, like that kind of, you know.
Yeah, they've definitely got that sound for sure. But yeah, probably their influence. They're probably one of the bands who you know, as well as you know the famous Gig. Slaughter and the Dogs being around is probably a big catalyst for a lot of bands coming up.
100%.
So mainly for their influence and Where Have All the Boot Boys Gone? Nice. Slaughter and the Dogs.
So pick number 2 for me. I've gone for a band I just mentioned in my last pick. I've gone for Magazine. So How Devoto was originally in Buzzcocks. He left after the first EP and he said he was basically frustrated and fed up with punk was already becoming almost a bit uniform and a bit set by rules. And he didn't want that. He didn't want to be part of movements. Went to college, I think, for about a year. Formed Magazine in about 1977. And they originally had also, if you're familiar, Barry Adamson on bass, who's also been in the Bad Seeds and various, you know, as a solo artist. He's kind of like a jobbing musician. He's played in a lot of really great bands or on some great albums. They were like a magazine, like post-punk, art punk, even new wavy a little bit. They originally were only together for about 4 years, I think. They split in 81. They did 4 albums, all charted in the top 40. Obviously, their biggest hit, if you know them, is Shot by Both Sides, which is a fucking killer tune. But they've got some great songs and great albums as well. That debut Real Life is probably my favourite, but Secondhand Daylight, Correct Use of Soap, but also amazing. And yeah, just like I say, just a great, just a really great fucking Northern UK post-punky art punk band. Like I say, came out of, after Devoto left Buzzcocks, and arguably the Buzzcocks became, you know, the better band after he left. And he formed a great band himself, so yeah, Magazine, pick number 2.
My next pick, a band I've hopped on about quite a lot on this channel, and they're always going to get on because I think they are just unbelievably good. I've gone for the Chameleons, goth rock kind of indie band, who came out, you know, during a period where maybe they got overlooked by other bands, and that's maybe why I've always tried to figure out why they're not quite as well known. It was actually my missus who got me onto them. She was recommending me some goth bands once. We were riding in the car. I think the song Swamp Thing came on straight away. I was like, who is this? I was instantly interested in who it was. The album Script of the Bridge and Strange Times, they're both unbelievable. Now, it's not a bold statement, I truly believe. Well, it is a bold statement, I guess. The Chameleons should have been as big as the biggest bands from Manchester. That's how good I truly believe they are. They're just that good. That's all I'm going to say about them. The Chameleons is my third pick.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that I'd never really listened to that band until you harped on about them.
It still annoys me how little they get talked about.
I would agree. Like after listening to them and think, yeah, fair play. Like
well, it's
definitely
funny,
an underrated band.
It's funny because I watched a few similar lists to what we're doing today, just out of curiosity, what other people had picked as top Manchester bands.
Okay.
No one of any of the lists I watched picked the Chameleons. I was like, how do people not? They're even not aware, because I refuse to believe that not enough people like them. They're that good. Do you know what I mean? They're so good.
But I think when you've got a city like Manchester where so many big bands have come out, you're always going to get some real class ones who maybe just get missed.
That's what it was. Like, what did they say? Big fish, small pond, small fish, big pond, maybe kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe.
But like I said, I believe they should. They're good enough to have been they could have been as important as a lot of these bands. I'm not quite sure why they weren't.
Well, fair play.
Yeah.
Third pick for me, so I've gone for The Fall. So, The Fall, very famous, UK, Manchester, 1976, post-punk, noise, post-punk I guess is the best thingy. So, they're quite famous for having 60 plus ex-members by the time of Marky Smith's death, when they split up, obviously, because Marky Smith being the main guy. 30 plus studio albums. They're one of John Peel's favourite bands. he said about them, he said what he loves about the Fall is they're always different, always the same. And I kind of get it. Like, I can't sit here and say I've listened to all 30 of the, whatever, 31, 32 studio albums they've got. I reckon I've listened to 10 or 11 of them, and there's about 5 that I always go back to. But those 5 are fucking unreal.
Right.
And they're early ones for me. I like Live at the Witch Trials and Nation's Saving Grace, Hex Education Hour, Perverted by Language, stuff like that. But, there's choice picks throughout their career. I just fucking... I love him. I loved him. His biography is well worth a read. The guy is so quotable. Again, much like a lot of people from Manchester, musician-wise, got opinions on just about everything and everyone, and they're fucking great. I think, because I picked one of their albums when we did post-punk many, many moons ago, and I might have told the story where he's quite famous, Marcus Smith. He fired one of their sound engineers because he was eating a salad.
Yeah.
And that was it. That was why. But yeah, and it just, for me, one of the goats of post-punk, especially UK post-punk, and I fucking... if you hear a band now like Sleaford Mods, for instance, like, there's no way that exists without the Fall. No chance. They are almost an imitation of that for me. Not a diss either. I like the band, but yeah, that's my pick. I'd say one of my favourite post-punk bands, one of my favourite UK bands from the 70s and 80s, the Fall.
My next band is probably my favourite band of all time that picked up a guitar, shall we say. Obviously, when you talk about the big band in your life, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, all these mega bands that are like seen as the Smiths were always my Beatles. I was never a fan of the Beatles. I never have been a fan of the Beatles. I prefer the Rolling Stones to the Beatles. Even though we live in the vicinity of Liverpool, the Beatles have just never resonated with me in any way, shape or form. The Smiths were my Beatles. From a very young age, going back to like late teens, early 20s, I was one of those back bedroom casualties who would sit there listening to the Smiths and The Cure and would fucking wallow in my own misery at times. I really was, I was one of them.
We've all been there.
Yeah, I was one of them. And you talk about perfect discographies, I think I've mentioned it, it's with the Ruts. The Smiths and the Ruts are probably the only 2 bands I can think of where their B-sides and their like reject songs are as good as their singles and their album tracks.
I think I can only think of one Smith song I'm not a big fan of,
Golden Lights.
Okay, 2. That's a good point, actually. Vicar in a Tutu.
I love Vicar in a Tutu.
I can take that one or leave it.
No, yeah, I love it.
All the others, I think.
I love it. I love it. Obviously, probably the biggest tragedy with the Smiths is probably what Morrissey has come out and said years later has tarnished the legacy, which then makes you feel for anything worse for the other. It makes you feel bad for the other Smiths.
I think so.
Do you know what I mean? I mean, I'm pretty good at separating art from artists, but some of the stuff, he has ruined their legacy. Some of the stuff, and I know he wants to go against the grain, and I get all that. But one of the things I think when we were talking about what makes city songs for the music, one of the things I think makes bands from certain cities great is when there's more to the band than just the music.
Yeah.
There's a certain imagery.
Yeah.
They paint a picture of the city with their music.
Yeah.
The Smiths are the best at it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like you think of some of the song titles, you think Rush Home Ruffians, Piccadilly Play, there's so many. The songs talk, they are painting a picture of Manchester at that time. Even the imagery that they use on their albums is all stellar and gives you this feeling of kind of like a kitchen sink drama kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. I've always been a huge fan. They've always been there in the background of my life. My mum and dad. My mum could probably sing you a load of Smith songs just because of what she's heard coming out of my bedroom over 25 years.
Yeah.
So yeah, probably not probably the Smiths. Probably my favourite guitar band ever. To be fair.
Fucking great band.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I knew you'd want them. I wasn't going to even fight you on them.
Yeah.
I love them as well, though. They are a fucking amazing band. And I think Noel Gallagher said a similar thing. As much as Noel Gallagher loves the Beatles, he said that the Smiths were like his generation's Beatles.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think what it is, you know what I think?
And the Jam, I think he said it about as well.
I try and like really like get down to what it is that makes them so special. And I've said quite a few things here now, but you've got a genius songwriting partnership with Morrissey and Marr. Now, Andy Rourke and Mike Joyce are wizards on their instruments, but Morrissey and Marr were the main songwriters, right? Now, you've got a guy like Morrissey at the time. I'm not speaking of him now, I'm speaking of him in the Smiths, bear that in mind. some of the things he was, I think the reason he appealed to so many men, especially, is he was singing about things that you'd probably maybe be too ashamed to speak about to your mates.
Like de-emasculated.
Yes, yeah. And, you know, even like all footy hooligans and that one, were massive into the Smiths, because it was like, he was tapping into a part of us that maybe we're not always, what's the word, brave enough to really admit is there, you know, a more vulnerable side.
Yeah, I can see that.
And on top of Johnny Marr's just jangly guitars, and I blame Johnny Marr actually for my mid-20s kind of emo discovery, because I was because of the Smiths and Johnny Marr. Around that age, I wanted to I tried to sort out as many jangly bands as I could, and most of them were the Midwest emo bands that I could find.
Stuff,
So
fair play.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. All right, well, let's move on then. Pick number 4 for me. I've gone for the Happy Mondays. They had to come up, didn't they? So, one of the seminal Factory Records bands, one of the seminal Manchester or Madchester bands from that time. They formed in 1980, though, I believe, which was earlier than I thought, but their first album, the Squirrel, G-Man, 24-Hour Party People, Plastic Faces, Can't Smile, I probably got that a little bit wrong, came out in 87. Their best 2 albums, Bummed and Pills and Thrills and Bellyaches, they're that for me, like that. Those 2 are fucking flawless. You know, big hits came off Pills and Thrills, like Step On, Kinky Afro came off that, it may be Bummed or that album, I can't remember now. But both of them are full of, like, for me, their best tunes. They mixed, like, indie with funk, with post-punk, with neo-psychedelic, and then obviously that rave influence came in as well, like say, and the Hacienda. And I've heard, I don't know how true this is, but they were kind of responsible for ecstasy in the North, because at their gigs they were fucking launching them into the crowds and stuff. I don't know how true that is. Obviously, they also had, you know,
wouldn't surprise me.
Bez doing the dancing, and I think that was something to do with Sean being uncomfortable on stage, and he called Bez was just his mate and possibly a dealer for him, and he just wanted to get Bez up or something like that. And Bez gets up and just doesn't know what the fuck to do, starts dancing, made a career out of it, didn't he? But all that, I think they're more famous sometimes for, like, Bez and for their antics, being junkies and you know, just partying or whatever, and there's all the stories, like the album, you know, that they recorded in the Caribbean, was it, somewhere or something like that, and didn't do the vocals, he just spent all the money on crack, sold furniture in the studio, held the tapes to ransom, all that stuff. You know, there's a lot of myth, lore and legend about that band, but strip all that back, and like I say, especially those 2 albums, fucking outstanding. They're a fucking great band, Happy Mondays. I
think when we're talking about, I don't even know if we've mentioned, I know you just mentioned the Hacienda there, but I think when we're discussing a Manchester, when we've got a Manchester video on the go here, surely we've got to mention Tony Wilson, Factory Records, and the Hacienda as being massive. So even if I don't know if we've mentioned them
I
right
did
now.
Bring Tony Wilson up briefly before.
I just think you've got to mention them. It's got to be rammed home, hasn't it, for a Manchester video like
Manchester
this.
Music, definitely.
My last pick, probably obvious. People are probably surprised they haven't been mentioned yet. I've gone Joy Division, a band who I bought Unknown Pleasures very young on because of the music I was getting into at the time. And you know what? For years, the penny did not drop with me. It took me a long time to get into Joy Division because it was so different. It's so weird. It's so, you know what I mean? There was such a strange band, so strange to look at. So, you know, it's just everything. The music was strange to me back then. I just couldn't. And then one day, I think it was one day I was watching something and Shadowplay was playing in the background, and it just, the penny just went blink like that, and suddenly I realised, and my eyes I was like, oh, now I get it. And obviously, what I was saying, similarly to the Smiths, when a band paints a picture of their city, when they have a specific vision of what they're doing, I've said it before, that when you look at photographs of Joy Division, or not even just photographs of Joy Division, but any imagery involved with Joy Division, you feel cold, you feel freezing. I think for me, the peak thing to listen to Joy Division is the B-side of Closer. If you want to listen to darkness and just despair, listen to the B-side of Closer. And I think when you look at it in hindsight now, we were obviously not born at the time, but when you listen to Closer, the B-side of it, especially because it gets progressively darker, it's not too shocking with how that band ended when you hear the end. It's got, there's almost Obviously, he's turned out to be a big idol of mine in music. Can't really say too much about them. Joy Division.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And one of the best ever.
Yeah.
So my last pick is going to tie into that, and I've picked New Order. So New Order, as you all probably know, formed 1980 after the passing of Ian Curtis, the remaining three members. Stephen Morris, is it how you pronounce it? Peter Hook and Barney Sumner formed New Order, and then Gillian joined very soon after. I think they wanted someone they knew to come in as well as fourth member. And then again, another flagship Factory Records band. You know, quite famously, the Blue Monday 12-inch lost money for the label every time one sold.
Crazy when you
it's insane business practice, isn't it?
You think that,
insane. But it's also the biggest selling 12-inch single of all time, I believe. I loved it. I loved the first one. Oh God, what was it called? The very first single they put out.
The one Joy of it,
Ceremony in a Lonely Place. That one, I love that. But obviously, their sound definitely progressed.
Yeah, because didn't Joy Division do Ceremony first?
I think originally it was a Joy Division song. Yeah. Because I think it was like 3 weeks. They started like rewriting new songs and stuff. Like they didn't know what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually had arguments with people where, and I don't think that the people on the opposing side of this, because I actually do prefer Joy Division, but I think New Order are fucking outstanding as well. I've had arguments with people who
you've got two of the best bands in the world.
I think New Order as well. One of the coming out the ashes, they lost their singer. They, rather than get a new singer and forge forward as Joy Division, they reinvented themselves and they've separated themselves completely from it now. They are their own entity.
Well, they're the light to Joy Division's dark.
And obviously it's similar members, but what I mean is, like, as separate bands, they can be taken as completely separate bands now. They don't sound too much alike anymore. But all that aside, like you say, they are just a fucking outstanding band, like amazing. Like, some of their albums are great, absolutely great. Some of their singles are just otherworldly good, aren't they? Power, Corruption and Lies album, for instance, is just fucking flawless. Technique, flawless. They've got loads, especially in their initial run. Again, they split up in the 90s. That initial run for me is brilliant, barring a few maybe duds here and there. They've just outstanding after outstanding single, outstanding album after outstanding album. And like I say, some people I've argued just said that they think New Order were the better band. I might slightly disagree with that, but I don't think it's an invalid argument.
But yeah, I can also see why they think
exactly.
that. There's times when I prefer New Order to Joy Division.
We all would, wouldn't we?
But like New Order are a joyful sounding band.
Yeah, much more.
Joy Division, despite the name, are not a joyful sounding band. Do you know what I mean?
No, very true, very true.
So there is times where I go through where I much prefer New Order.
And the same, I agree, at some points. I just think, looking at it objectively, for my taste, I feel Joy Division I prefer, but I don't disagree there.
Someone put a gun to my head, I think Joy Division.
Exactly, same, but like I said, I don't think it's an invalid argument to say that New Order are the better band either, and like you say, definitely two of the best to come out of Manchester, barring maybe the Smiths, and two iconic bands globally as well. So yeah, that's the picks. Honourable mention.
Talking about New Order and Joy Division and the Smiths, my honourable mention is going to be a band called The Electronic, who is a super group of Johnny Marr from the Smiths and Bernard Sumner. Occasionally, quite more than occasionally, actually, they collaborate with Neil Tennant. He was kind of like
he was like a third member.
Yeah, almost like a third member. But their first album, especially, just listen to the single "Getting Away with It." It's a brilliant piece of amazing pop music. Yeah. So The Electronic is my honourable mention.
Nice. Okay, so honourable mention for me. I'm gonna go. I Am Kloot. There you go. So that's our picks. Let us know yours. I'm sure there's some key ones that we've missed because there's fucking loads.
Yeah.
And you know the score. Like and subscribe. Ring that bell if you want some notifications. Jump on the Instagram, the Facebook. Give us some likes, comments, follows, all that jazz. Thanks for watching. See you next.